That is grounded influence. That is sustainable influence. It would be a shame for you to have a booming moment of influence that you can't sustain. Hey y'all, welcome back to the Fast Forward Podcast. The topic for this month is privilege versus influence. And I spent last episode speaking about privilege in detail and how it is more than just our entitlements, but also our concessions. But the topic is privilege versus influence. So I couldn't let an episode pass without describing what is influence. Now it's interesting because influence, power, and privilege are like triplets in a way. Maybe maybe they first cousins. But influence is interesting because we have become so used to now hearing the term influencer. And so we think of folks who are acting like they love things to get you to buy something. That is a type of influence that has, to me, almost diluted the potency of the real concept of influence. So I want to spend some time. Y'all know I love getting us clear on shared language and getting us grounded. So I wanted to define what is influence. I talk about influence, privilege, and power in my debut book, Evolution to Equity. This particular part is in chapter 2, and I'll talk more about influence versus power. But influence is a covert method of control. So if I am influencing you, it is not the same as leveraging power, which is that I am making a direct use of my authority to make a decision, to press the button, to check the box, to create openings for you to do something. And I want to talk about influence because it's those covert methods that, especially for our careers and when building our companies, we can ignore how powerful they can be and how impactful they can be. If I had to compare the expression of power versus influence, I would think of it as sponsorship versus mentorship. So sponsorship is a form of power. I have the power to put you in the room. I have the power to sign off on a promotion. I have the power to give you the internship. But influencing is mentorship, which is where I'm giving you the information. I'm describing the problem. I'm sharing information about office politics. I'm recommending programs, or I'm recommending different classes or courses or certifications for you to take in order for you to make the decision, then build your career. And I think that's an important distinction because when we think about how mentorship impacts our career paths, we don't often value mentorship unless we feel like there is an immediate and direct impact, which again, most of the time is sponsorship. So influence, especially influence through mentorship, does not have to come from just the people we have been taught to appreciate their perspective. Some of my best mentors in my career and in the building of my company have been executive assistants, have been former clients, have been prospects that I haven't been able to land a deal with because they have taught me where I needed to refine. I will never forget. I had this job, y'all. Most of my jobs were just like a hot mess. So a lot of times when you hear me talking about my career, it's gonna be some crazy stories. I had this one particular experience. They were just trifling on this job, and it was two people in particular. It's like freaking frat child. It's like one who was the head narcissist, and then they had their flying monkey person who would back them up. It was an absolutely insane experience. There was an incident where, so for this particular job, I had to deal with like 7 different departments. Actually, more than that, it was probably about 10 to do my everyday work. And in this one particular department, there were 4 ladies that I had to talk to regularly, and they had different spans of control over this particular process. One in particular, she was kind of the outcast of the group of 4 for a number of reasons. I found her to be just like the kindest person. She was so nice, just a beautiful spirit, always helpful, like always very direct. I really enjoyed her. And so one day I had a meeting with the 4 of them. We got done what we need to get done. And the 3 who were kind of clicked up, they went to lunch by themselves and left the other lady by herself. So when I was walking past, I was getting ready to go to lunch and I saw her. I was like, oh, where everybody else go? She like, girl, they went to lunch. They ain't take me. I'm like, well, come on, let's go to lunch together. So we go to this nearby restaurant and we sit down eating and kicking it. And she was like, are you okay? Because I noticed that you've been kind of sad in the last few meetings. Again, these are people I had to talk to like multiple times a week to get my work done. So they would see like my up and down moods. And so I told her, I think I started crying actually because it had gotten that bad. And I was like, they just keep picking on me. And she was like, you know why, right? And I was like, no. And she was like, you're the dynamic one. And I was like, what? And she said, you're the dynamic one. She said, you don't notice that when you ask people to do things and you ask people for information, they give it to you right away. That's why they send you to do things all the time. Folks never want to talk to them. You don't notice that you could call a meeting or you could get favors from folks for stuff that they would never do and really don't have to do. You don't notice that people smile at you. They don't smile at them. When they send emails, folks don't respond, but when you send it, they respond right away. You never paid attention to that? And I was like, no. And she was like, yeah, you need to start paying attention because you're the dynamic one in there and they know it. And one of them is mad that they don't have that same quality to them. And the other one knows you have it and she's using you. And after that, it was like the game changed. It wasn't that I became arrogant or disrespectful to them, but that person saying that helped me to take back just a little bit of my power. Now that I think about it, that was the beginning of me coming to realize my capacity as a strategic thinker. It was very early in that journey, so I didn't get it right away, but it started something. It was a snowball effect that I didn't forget for later career experience. I bring that up because, again, mentorship is not just the people who tell you about the best grad school program. Mentorship can be the person that talks to you about qualities that they see in you that are just a little bit different than others around you. These are the people who might see your impact in ways that you don't. I never forget, it was another coworker. And the way the desks were seated, it was almost like it was quads, but they were across an aisleway. Strange. Anyway, she was the executive assistant to one of the executives in our area. And she and I were next to each other. And I used to love talking to her. We used to crack up all the time. And I remember she would put me up on game. So she would put me up on game on little ways to get executives in the company to respond. She had been at the company for decades. And so I would send things and I'm just trying to hurry up and get the meeting requests off or hurry up and get something out. And she would be like, come here. And I'm like, yeah, what's up? And she was like, when you create this, put this. So like, let's say it was a phone meeting instead of a meeting on Zoom or in person. She was like, in the subject of it, put whether it's phone, in person, virtual. So that person's assistant will know, and that'll decrease the likelihood that they gonna reject it. Because if you say in person and they know that that person has to travel across campuses or to another office, if they got something before or after, they not gonna do it. But if you put that it's phone, that's easy. They could just pick up the phone. They could even do that in the car on their way to someplace. They're in the airport, this and that. And I was like, oh, that's such a small thing. But because of the type of work that I had to do, I needed people to respond. I needed people to give me information. And it helped a lot. It helped a whole lot. And it's those types of things that level of influence can mean the world to your career. People gain influence over time. And I think that's one of the biggest things that I want to hone in on with this, because again, we so used to now hearing influencers where, oh, I put on this sweater from that company and it went viral. Yeah, that's a part of it. But you really develop influence over years of being trustworthy, attentive, mindful, respectable, dare I say, to where people can then trust your opinions and your perspective. So I could trust her telling me, hey, put this in the subject of that calendar invite, because I knew she done outlasted everybody in this department for a reason. I could trust my other coworker to say you're the dynamic one and know she meant it, because there would be tons of meetings where she might not even speak at all. She's just watching and observing. So she has time to watch and see. And she's in a bunch of meetings with them other people sometimes that I'm not in. So she can see how people are responding to them versus how they respond to me. If you really want to build influence and you really want to be an influencer, don't focus on the boom. Don't focus on the moments. Focus on the consistency that you form through every interaction to become a trusted voice. That's one of the reasons why I value building in silence so much. Because if I am to become an influencer, I have to become a trusted voice in every part and aspect of a system. I don't necessarily have to be an expert, but I do have to have an awareness. I have to understand how things fit together. Here's what I mean. Let's take, again, these random people who become influencers off of one thing. Let's say you become an influencer because you're doing like the mukbang stuff with eating food, right? If you don't understand the business side, for example, like to know contracts, if you don't know time management, if you don't understand basic principles of marketing to understand, even at a shallow level, market saturation or competitor analysis, if you don't understand seasonal preferences and you can't do market research, you gonna have that one moment and it's gonna all blow up. How many new celebrities have we seen where they're good at the thing that they do, but man, they had one bad interview and it just tanked their career because they didn't have media training? And I'm bringing this up to y'all because, again, being an influencer isn't just about the moment. It is about how you set yourself up to understand how the whole system works together. Systems thinking is critical for harnessing and growing your influence. So one of the ways that I have been able to grow my influence as an entrepreneur, particularly over the last like 3 years, 2-3 years, is because I sought to grow my knowledge and my relationships in every area that my business would need to thrive. So I've talked about this before. Obviously, my work area is HR. I don't work in sales, marketing, like in HR in particular has a complete knowledge gap in that, because as long as there are employees, HR got something to do. So I never had to learn marketing, never had to learn sales, because it won't do what my particular department does, because it's a part of your everyday work. And so that part has been super important for me as an entrepreneur, because I knew, baby, you can't run no company if you don't understand sales, marketing, if you don't understand finance, if you don't understand business development. I mean, these were key things that I knew I had no experience in because I really didn't have the time to focus on them. So when I went straight into full-time entrepreneurship, I got on my grind to take as many classes, as many opportunities as I could. I was not playing them games. And in 2022 in particular, I think I spent 2 and 23, I spent like at least 40% of my work time in development programs. Again, I knew I wasn't necessarily going to become an expert, but I, at the very least, needed to understand what was happening in my own company, even if that understanding meant that I could hire and source intelligently for somebody else who was an expert to do it. Me doing that has meant that now I have become a trusted voice in entrepreneurship, business development in general. Again, not because I am an expert in every area, but because I understand the system and then built contacts within the system and all the pieces of the system. Now I can be a trusted voice to support other people in their growth. That is grounded influence. That is sustainable influence. It would be a shame for you to have a booming moment of influence that you can't sustain. We don't want to be a firecracker. We want to be a light bulb. A light bulb burns consistently and to the same amount of strength for a long time. A firecracker, and it's beautiful when you look, but it lasts a moment and then it's gone. And the reason why I'm harping so much on sustainability and systems thinking and influence is because trends change all the time. I could do a million things with this podcast. I think this is a really good example of this. I could do a million things with this podcast. I could talk about the latest news stories. I could use it to gripe on my enemies. I could use it to talk about all the things that's wrong. I could talk about any number of things on this podcast. It's mad. I run it. But I made a decision purposely to run my podcast the way I do, to keep my topics where I keep them, to describe things the way I describe them, because I know that that is a sustainable model, not just for me, but for the trends that will come and go. If I had taken this podcast and started it, when did it start? Back in 22, and started it with just talking about all the mess, all of the leaders who had falls from grace, all of the DEI mistakes that people made, all of the latest story. Yeah, I probably would have got a ton of views right away, and I might have even gotten a couple sponsorships. But guess what? That's not the tone now. Brands are increasingly weary of folks who they consider to be pot stirrers, especially with no solutions in mind. All you talking about is problems. The fact that I've chosen to leverage my platform to focus on business topics where I know I have expertise, to bring in other experts to talk about things. I try to focus on solutions and not just problems. I try to come from a positive angle, purposely stay away from what I perceive are messy news stories where I don't have nothing to do with it and have no expertise. That's a choice that I make, and I do that on purpose. Because I'm able to do that, I'm able to sustain what I got going on. Because I can think of plenty other people in my field, or fields really, because I touch a bunch of different things in my fields, who have had to backtrack later. I just saw somebody actually that when they first came out and got hot, it was nothing but just, this who messed up, I don't like them, da-da-da. And now they in a totally different place. They have amazing connections. They've become a trusted voice in certain things. And folks are always asking, well, where's the mess? Where's the mess? Where's the mess? And they like, oh, I don't do that now. And so now they have to deal with the backlash of people feeling like they're quote unquote fake, because they built their reputation on exposure. But now that they are a little bit more reserved in their perspectives and focus more on their actual area of expertise, it's hard to balance that. So seeing that, and that's just one person that came to mind, but I can think of about 5 people who I followed, and they've had to backtrack or become very quiet on certain things. And to be clear, it's not because they're fake. It is because the more information you have, sometimes the more you mature, the more exposure you have to certain things. And honestly, the more you have to sort through your own conflicting perspectives, you have a lot more grace and respect for other people's issues and what they're going through. And so I made the conscious decision on this podcast, I'm just not even going to get that started. Does it make me seem perhaps out of touch at times? Sure. Because there are tons of stories that I could be talking about that are still related to my industry. So to be clear, it's not that the quote unquote messy topics aren't related to my work. They are. I just choose not to talk about them because I don't know how that's going to play out. I don't know who I might hurt. I don't know what's really going on. I don't have all the information. So I'm going to just leave that alone. That's a choice. And because that's how I choose to set up my place of influence, meaning I have a whole channel where I can talk about whatever I want, the result is that I don't have to do a bunch of backtracking. I don't have to do a whole bunch of cleaning up and deleting stuff. I don't have to do a whole bunch of excuse making and apology. I don't have to do any of that because I'm keeping it right here where I know I can make a difference. And I don't have to feel any regret about any of that. So my question to you is, what do you do with your influence? Do you use your influence wisely? Because you can't unring a bell. Once you say something and it leaves your mouth, once you write something and put it out there, somebody could grab it at any point. How do you use your influence? How do you use your covert method to share information? If I had to think about the ways that I mentor people, I would say I hit a watershed moment. I had to be not like 18, 19 because I was a freshman in college. And I've always been the type of person where it's like, sometimes I just try stuff, right? So I would be like, okay, I'm gonna just go to parties. All right, I'll start drinking. Okay, I'll start doing this. And then when I was done with it, would go do something else. But I remember having friends in my circle that they couldn't pivot that fast. And so they would start doing things and it would get out of hand. Then I would ask them like, well, why you do that? And they like, cause I was running behind you. And I remember just like my gut just like dropping. Cause it hit me. Oh, I have the power to compel people to do things at times by saying, hey, let's do this. But really it's more so that I'm influencing people to do things that they having a hard time getting out of. And I remember at 19, my prayer changing. And I remember repenting to God and just being like, I'm so sorry for the times where I have influenced people to do horrible things for them, right? Even if it's not horrible, just like on paper, but I know what it led to, the second, third, and fourth degree consequences. And my prayer was that I would only use my influence for good moving forward. That I will only influence people to do things that brought God glory and that they didn't have to regret later. And I've worked hard to keep that promise. Again, not just to myself, but also to God, because I know that there are many times where I'm a voice, again, that people will listen to, that I'm a trusted voice, that sometimes I'm the voice of reason. And when you think about your own life, how do you leverage your influence for good? It don't mean that I'm always right, but it does mean that I always try to maintain positive intent. One way that I've learned to leverage my influence for good is how I start off a statement. I'll start out by saying, hey, here's something I've observed, or here's something I was thinking about. What do you think? And then give people the space to talk through things. Because sometimes as an influencer, when you just make a statement and don't give the other person room to grapple with it too, your influence is so heavy in their perspectives, it guides the decision making. And this is something that I've been able to strengthen as a coach, because coaching is a deeply influential role too. And it's really you just creating space for people to tell themselves what they need to do. But I try my best not to just flat out be like, go do this. What do you think? How do you feel? Or tell me about what's going on. Those pauses give people space for their voice to carry just as much importance in the conversation as possible. So even when I think about the woman who talked to me about being dynamic in the team, her statement to me was, you're the dynamic one. Haven't you noticed this? And her asking that and then pausing for me to process it made the difference between me being able to immediately reject it, because my self-esteem was just in the toilet at that point. But her saying it, it was like, oh, wait, hold on. Oh, okay, I can see that. Oh, wait. And then I could process it, and she and I spent time talking through it. Give people that space as an influencer to think too. I think that's one of my main, I won't even say gripe, because honestly, I'm not always paying attention to folks, but that's one of the issues with the way influencers function now. It's not, oh, I tried this new blush and it's beautiful. It's, oh my gosh, this is the best blush I've ever had. Let me get rid of all my others. And everybody's like, yeah, them blushes suck. I'm only doing this one. And it's like, yeah, but where's the space for it to exist for me, or maybe not work for me? When you think about how you leverage your influence, the pregnant pause for other people to process, that's a lot of P's. The pregnant pause for people to process the information is going to make the difference between you being an influence for good or an influence that creates negative impact. So let me know down in the comments, who has been one of your most influential mentors? Was it an expected source? And then also tell me, what does it mean for you to influence using the pregnant pause? Of course, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. And I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts in the comments and seeing what you all think. I'll catch you on the next one. Bye, y'all.